Reason number 46 to get a Nissan. Features, especially the ones you get with the 2025 Nissan Kicks Play. Integrated Apple CarPlay, a spacious interior, advanced safety features, and more room in your budget. Because it's the most affordable new vehicle in Quebec. Get the 2025 Nissan Kicks Play S from only $22,774, including a $2,600 cash purchase bonus. Visit your Nissan dealer today. Until March 2nd, conditions apply. Details at Nissan.
Robin Flynn filling in for Elias Makos. The cost of your vehicle registration, if you live in Montreal, is set to make a massive jump in 2025. Drivers in the Greater Montreal area can expect to pay $150 this year compared to $59 last year. So what's with the big increase? These taxes are meant to finance public transit and are added on to what was the regular $30 contribution from drivers. In Quebec and Gagnon, registration fees are much cheaper, $60, and in Sherbrooke, it's only $34. Is this fair for Montrealers? Joining us now is Nicolas Gagnon, Quebec Director at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Good morning, Nicolas.
Good morning.
This is a massive increase. Like, we're not just talking about an extra couple of bucks here. Like, your registration is almost tripling. That is a really, really big increase.
Indeed. And that's an increase of 154% in 1 year. And that's going to be affecting disproportionately and unfairly so many families throughout Quebec. For example, like you said, in the Greater Montreal area, in 2024, a family owning two vehicles would have to pay approximately $118 to pay for their car registration tax. Well, in 2025, that's going to be approximately $300 because we're going to increase per vehicle the amount from $59 to $150. And that's going to be pretty much, like I said, affecting disproportionately families that don't have any other options, that have to use their car to go to work or to bring their kids to school. And those people on this new year now have to face a hike that they can sadly not avoid. And we have to be honest about it. This tax increase is happening because so many cities, like the city of Montreal, have not been able to properly manage the financial of their public transit system, and now they're pushing this tax hike on every other families around.
In conversation with Nicolas Gagnon, Quebec Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, about the huge hike that motorists are going to see in their vehicle registration this year. What I think is interesting is that we aren't seeing similar increases in other municipalities. Now, obviously, Montreal's public transit network is quite a bit more extensive than what you've got in Sherbrooke. But do you think that other municipalities are going to look at this and be like, maybe we can charge a little bit extra and throw a few more buses out on the road?
Well, that's definitely something to be fair, is that this would open a door for additional tax hike in the future, always to justify that this money would be used to fund the public transit system. And we have seen that in Quebec City as well. They're seeing a similar increase than in Montreal. Instead, that it's a smaller amount, but they're going from $30 per vehicle to $90. So that's still an increase of 200% in 1 year only. And again, in the case of the city of Quebec, they are basically saying that this additional money will be used to cover for the deficit of the public transit. So that I think is one of the worst part of it all, is that they're increasing the taxes, but it's not going to increase the quality of the service or improve the accessibility to public transit in regions where there is not access to it. It's basically just going to increase the tax on families, basically a money grab to fund those deficits, but it's not going to bring any additional quality to those services in the end.
Do you think that may be part of the reason? I mean, obviously there's a huge deficit for Montreal public transit. The STM has been talking about deficit for a few years now, especially since the start of COVID. But do you think that, you gave an example when we first started speaking about a family who has two cars. Do you think maybe part of the reason they're doing this is so that families will maybe go down to just one car and rely a little bit more on public transit since they're paying for it now?
Well, that could be one of the goals that they're pushing for, but sadly, like I said, it's for now they're not really talking about improving or really increasing the services in many regions where people will be affected by this tax hike. For example, the people living in Saint Jerome, they will be affected by this tax hike, but I don't think that they will see a metro station anytime soon in their area. So there's clearly a case where people will pay more for a service that they don't necessarily have access to, and we have seen the city of Montreal and the STM over the last year spend money on things that are not necessarily what you could see as priorities or even as an effective investment. For example, they purchased a bunch of electric bus that cost millions of dollars to taxpayers and they were never used. They spent a couple of hundreds of thousands of dollars on electric vehicles for some of their top managers, and yet this expenses has never really been justified. So there's definitely some cleanup that those public transit systems should be doing first. That should have been the first call of the government. Instead, they went for families' pocket, and sadly, the taxpayers will have to pay more this year because of that.
In conversation with Nicolas Gagnon from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Quebec director of the CTF. When we talk about the Greater Montreal area, what does that include? Because that is quite vague. Like, are we just talking about the island of Montreal, or are we including people on the South Shore and Laval in this increase?
Oh, that includes a lot of people, almost half of Quebec population, actually. That goes from Saint Jerome to Laval to Longueuil, and that includes also Saint-Basile-le-Grand, Île-Perrot, and the island of Montreal. So that's approximately 4 million of people, and most of them have a car or at least have one in their driveway currently. So so like I said, this tax registration hike will definitely affect a lot of families.
Interesting. So then this money isn't necessarily all going to the STM. It would be going to like the RTL and the other sort of organizations that exist because, as Catherine just texted into 514-790-0800, Chateauguay does belong to the Greater Montreal region. Will we get better public transportation? I used to rely on Chateauguay's public transit, and let me tell you, you can't. It's very, very common for buses to not show up, and already you're only getting a bus every half hour, and if it doesn't show up, you're definitely going to be late for work. So, I think it's very easy to look at the STM and get frustrated, but you've still got a metro coming every 5-6 minutes. When you're living on the South Shore or in Saint Jerome, at least Laval has the metro now. It's a little bit more difficult to use public transit, isn't it?
Exactly. And so that is why it's kind of unfair for all of those families that are living in those areas that they will be paying that tax hike, but they won't necessarily have access to more public transit services in their area. So that's where the unfairness is. They're paying more, but they're not receiving more.
That's frustrating. I hate when I don't mind paying additional taxes, if we're being quite honest, Nicolas, if I can actually get something in return, right? Like if I could see investments into public transit in my area, I would be happy to pay that additional fee because then maybe I could take the bus instead of driving my car.
Indeed. And the thing is that sadly, that tax hike is not the only thing that will be hitting us this year. We already have a couple of municipal taxes that are going to be increased this year. We also know that as of January 1st, we have the Quebec pension plan that has been the rate has been increased as well, same as for the Quebec employment insurance. So there's a lot of different tax hikes that will be hitting Quebecers this year, and this one is basically, I could say, one of the drop too much in this case. And yet again, it's not going to be increasing or improving any kind of service. It's basically just going to be taking more money out of the pockets of families, hardworking families that have no other choices, no other available options to be able to drive their kids to school or to go to work, and they will have to pay more in taxes for, not necessarily for more services. That's the worst point in all of it. If you pay taxes and you have a service in return, at least you can say that you're satisfied in the end, but that sadly won't be the case.
Unfortunate. Nicolas Gagnon is the Quebec director at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate your insight.
Thank you for your invitation. Have a good day.